Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our panel. I want to welcome you all. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to have this conversation with you and get to answer the questions, especially those that have submitted questions in advance. Each of the panelists will get an opportunity to introduce themselves, but I just thought I would start it out. So as I said, my name is Pilar Mensah. I'm the Dean of Admissions at the University of Houston Law Center. I've been with the Law Center for approximately 10 years, always in the admissions office, so I have a really good idea of our school and our culture and any questions that you might have about our program. And I will let our moderator take over and start the introductions.
Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Angela Ambers Henderson. I have the pleasure of serving as the Assistant Director of Admissions for the University of Houston Law Center, and I will serve as your moderator / facilitator here today. I'm going to ask that if you are not a panelist, that you do turn your camera off. We would appreciate that. That will allow everyone to know that when they see a face, it's probably someone representing one of the Texas Law School and is an admissions officer. So that'll just keep it easier. Also, just for everyone's edification, we are recording this session. Alrighty, I would like to start with my colleague, Alicia, if you would mind introducing yourself. A couple of things, introduce yourself, your title in that, your institution, and one word to describe your institution.
I didn't get a heads up. I'm okay. And I'm first, great.
You're good.
No, is it still morning? Yes, good morning. My name is Alicia Kramer. I am the Assistant Dean of Admissions at South Texas College of Law, Houston. One word, downtown.
Okay, love it. All righty, can we have Michelle Rahman go next? We need to unmute yourself, Michelle.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
My name is Michelle Rahman. I'm the Acting Dean of Admissions at Thurgood Marshall's Law School. As you can tell from the gray hair, I have been around a while. This is my 36th year in law school admissions, so I think I've heard a lot of questions I'm hoping I'll hear today. The word that I would describe Thurgood Marshall is changing.
Very well, thank you. Welcome. All righty, Brian, we'll have you go next.
Good morning. My name is Brian Owsley. I'm an assistant professor of law at UNT Dallas College of Law. I have been here 6 years now, and this is our 7th year of operation. I would say one word to describe our law school is diverse.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Catherine, you're up next.
Hi there, my name is Kathy Castiano. I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions at St. Mary's School of Law in San Antonio. I guess I'll use Catholic for our one word.
Okay, thanks. All righty, Jenny.
Hi, I'm Jenny Branson. I'm the Assistant Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at Baylor Law School. I've been here for about 8 years, and the one word I would use to describe us is purposeful.
Very well, thank you. All righty, Matthew.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matthew Lay. I'm the Dean of Admissions here at Texas Law, and it's great to be here. If I were to describe Texas Law in one word, I would say community.
Thank you. Terrence? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, we'll get that right. Thank you. Howdy, my name is Terrence Cook. I have the pleasure of serving as the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Texas A&M School of Law, located in Fort Worth, Texas. In describing the law school, student-centered.
Okay, thank you. Jill.
Thank you. I'm Jill Nykirk, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions at SMU Dedman School of Law. And even though I think I'm last, the one word thing is really tripping me up, but I'm going to say Dallas.
Dallas, okay. Very well. Well, thank you so much, panelists. And I just want to make sure I didn't forget anybody. Okay. A couple housekeeping rules kind of thingy here. We're going to ask all our panelists to keep your cameras on. I will probably go off camera now so as not to confuse folks. There will be some questions that I will be asking all of you to answer, but not necessarily every question is going to be for every person. I know some things are the same at some institutions. We did receive over 75 questions beforehand, so we definitely want to try to get to all of them if possible. If you didn't get the memo, just to rehash that, make sure you have some paper and a writing utensil, pen or marker in front of you. Some of your answers will actually not require you to speak, but will require you to flash counting your answers. We will have some polling questions as we go through today. And in fact, we're going to start with our first polling question.
I'm going to need a second. It says I can't do the poll because I'm logged in on another device. Not sure what that means. Let me work on it.
Okay. Well, then we're just
I might log out and log back in then. I don't know what that means.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We will come back to that. Okay. So sort of a round robin, this is a question that I know was raised and also one that students think of often. And that's whether or not your institution allows a start 2 times a year. In other words, fall and spring. So if you can just go down the line and answer that. And also just another thing, I may be referring to some of my colleagues by their first name. I may be referring to them by their institutional name. So just want to make sure everybody stays awake. So South Texas.
Yes, fall and spring.
Okay. UT.
Just fall.
Okay. A&M. We want to hear you.
Just fall.
Okay. SMU.
Just fall.
Catherine.
Just fall.
Baylor.
Fall, spring, and summer.
Awesome. Thank you. Michelle.
Fall only.
Brian.
Fall only as well at UNT Dallas.
Okay. And I will answer for the University of Houston Law Center. We only allow fall starts. Okay. Great. Next question I would like to raise for the panel is, we might as well just go for that, what I call the elephant in the room, because it was raised by a number of people prior to starting this session. And that's, in light of COVID, how are things currently on campus? And assuming things don't change too much with COVID, how might things be for the fall 2021? We will start with SMU.
I had a feeling you were going to start with me. I don't know what was up with that. So SMU has been fully open since June 1st. So I haven't been at home in a really long time. We are a hybrid model, which I imagine anybody who's open is, because we realized we couldn't fit all the people with socially distanced classrooms in our classrooms. And so our students are taking classes both virtually and in person with distancing requirements in place. To be real honest just about how the campus feels, it feels weird. It feels quiet. It feels not like I love it, not like it should be, but I imagine that's the case at all universities and probably all businesses right now. But I can't predict the future. We are looking at the spring being very much the same. And I'm just going to say, I'm hoping and praying that the fall will be back to normal, but we'll all have to wait and see what happens.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. All righty. Jenny, what's going on in Baylor?
The exact same thing as Dean Nykerk just said. I mean, I could copy that exactly.
Okay. Well, let's do it this way. Is there something happening different than what's already been mentioned at any of the institutions represented here today? If so, please unmute yourself and share. Nope. Okay. All righty. All right. Next question that was raised. Can you speak to the issue of diversity at your institution in general, related to student organizations, et cetera? Let's see. A&M, why don't you start for us?
statistically, the entering class for fall 2020 showed 35% self-identifying as being racially and ethnically diverse. I will say, and I think the other part of that question was in regards to organizations.
Yes.
You're going to see a ton of organizations at Texas A&M School of Law. The wonderful thing about it, I started with that hyphenated student-centered, is that if the organization you're interested in does not exist, we have the means and resources for you to create it. So if you can get two people of like mind together, then you have the opportunity to create a really dynamic organization that you might find lacking at the law school. You're going to see all types of organizations, from practice area to affinity groups, Black Law Students Association, Latinx Association, Asian American, Pacific Islander associations. So all of those affinity groups that you normally would think of as being associated with racial and ethnic diversity exist, and they are pretty active there. I'll stop there and leave it to my colleagues, because I think some of them might expand on that definition of diversity. I kind of left it at the racial and ethnic component.
Okay, thank you so much, Terrence. Professor Owsley, would you share for us, please?
Yes, our student population is 48% self-identifying minority in terms of diversity. That breaks down roughly, I think 22% Latinx, 17% African American, and so on, down to I think 3% or so identifying as Native American. In terms of, similar to what Dean Cook said, we have a diversity of student groups. We have the various affinity groups that he noted. On the spectrum, we have Democratic and Republican student groups. We have the Federalist Society, which is essentially viewed as a predominantly conservative student or a student and legal organization. And on the flip side, we have American Constitution Society, which is a more liberal counterpart. So, and as Dean Cook said, if there's the interest among the student population, we have a Muslim student group, we have a Christian student group. So everything is driven by what the students want, and then it goes from there.
Did we lose Angela?
I was like, should we just keep going?
Yeah, she's just,
I thought I froze for a
oh,
moment.
okay.
I thought everyone was just speechless after I finished. But yeah, someone else
Hold
should
on,
just
hold
chime
on.
in.
I just wanted to say good morning really quickly. This is Danielle Cerveja from Texas Tech Law School. I am so sorry for joining you all just a few minutes late. Like the world, I was having some issues with my Wi-Fi this morning, so I really apologize, but I'm so happy to be here with my colleagues this morning and with all of our viewers, and excited to get into these questions.
So Angela
right.
just said
She's
keep
back.
going.
Okay, so here's a little technical
she's back.
difficulty. See, I'm back. I was always here. So now I'm on a different device, so that maybe we can have Dean Mensa manage the polling. We both can't share.
Yeah,
this.
it's unfortunately, it's still giving me the same error. So I don't know what.
Okay. So I don't know. Sorry about that. So I'm on a different device, but thank you and welcome to the panelists that just joined us. Just so you know, we are asking all of our panelists to be prepared with a sheet of paper and a marker. A couple of the questions will come to you. You'll just be asked to raise your sheet up for the answer. What we were just discussing, and I would like, you can go ahead and take it, Danielle, if you would like, is the issue of diversity came up as a question a couple times, actually. If you could speak to the issue of diversity in terms of the diversity of the students at your institution, and any organizations, perhaps affinity group organizations, if you don't mind sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. I had the opportunity to hear Dean Cook and Professor Owsley's answers. So as far as ethnic and racial diversity, which is the number that we report to the ABA, so that is the one that we take in, that we're actually counting. Our incoming class was about 35% students of color who chose to identify as such on our applications. But of course, we look at diversity broadly. About a third of our incoming class this year were non-traditional students. We have students of all kinds of religious backgrounds, different socioeconomic backgrounds. This year we had our largest cohort of LGBT students joining us. Students with different learning and physical abilities. And so we're really looking at diversity in every aspect. Similar to my colleagues, we have the affinity groups, Hispanic Law Student Association, Black Law Student Association, Asian Pacific Law Student Association, Outlaw. We're currently in the works of establishing a disability law students group for students who identify as such or are allies in the area and would like to kind of do a little bit more focus and research in that type of law. As far as efforts that we're making as a school, we do have a diversity and equity committee, which is made up of faculty and students. And we also have a separate diversity advisory board, which is made up of students from the affinity groups. And they do a ton of programs at the school throughout the year, working with other student groups just to kind of bring in speakers, highlight folks, and really make sure that everybody feels that they have a voice at the school and has representation in any aspect.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Alrighty. What I'd like to do at this point is to inquire as to whether or not any of my panelists has anything different to share relative to that question. Specifically, I'm going to ask for data in terms of representation. I think all of us have affinity group organizations and things of that nature. So in the interest of time, I am going to go through and ask that you share your demographic data, please. South Texas, can we hear from you?
Thank you. So the fall 20 entering class represented 46% minority students. The largest group was 26% Hispanic, 8% African American, and down from there. So yes, I hope that addresses your question. And thank you for doing this, because I think you're right. We all have a number of student orgs and things that we all have to share and offer. So that's good to know.
Thank you. Dean Mensah, can you share University of Houston, please?
Sorry, I'm going to be honest. I'm over here still trying to fix these polls. What exactly was the question?
Okay, never mind. Then I will speak for you when the time comes. So we'll skip
Okay.
it. Okay, going to our next panelist. Alrighty, let's see, Catherine.
So St. Mary's is about 60% diversity, with our largest group being about 50% Latinx, Hispanic, and then different ranges sort of from there.
Okay, all right, Michelle?
Yes, we're 85.5% students of color, over 50% African American, only 13% Caucasian. Of course, we have a fairly sizable population, 29% Hispanic and Asian.
Okay. All right, Matthew.
Here at Texas Law, the incoming cohort of 2020, we had 33% racial ethnic minority, which is the largest since our 2015 incoming cohort. We had 18% first generation students this year. 8% of the students were 30 years and wiser. And then about 11% of the students had graduate degrees. So a full spectrum, as my colleagues have mentioned, diversity in its broadest sense.
Okay, let's see. Did I forget someone? If I did forget you, please unmute yourself and share.
Me, SMU. We had 33% also, like UT, students of color at SMU, the largest group being our Hispanic students, followed by African-American students. And we also had, and now I already forgot what Matthew said, but we had 20% first generation students also, maybe also.
Okay. Now we're going to return back to Dean Mensah to address that question of diversity in terms of the fall 2020 class demographic data.
Okay, he's still, I'm still over here doing. Give me a second. I'm sorry.
Pilar, I'll hop in. I haven't gone yet. So while
Okay,
you're
go ahead.
coming up with that, I'll hop in.
Thank you.
Sure. So we were 32% students of color in the fall intern class. The largest groups for us were Hispanic and Asian, about equal. And we also had about a quarter of our class being first generation.
Thank you, Jenny.
Okay, I think I'm ready now. Sorry. Okay, we had approximately 36% of our students were minority, with the largest being our Hispanic at 15%, followed by our Asian students almost 14%.
Okay. Thank you, Dean Mensa. I think we've got our technical bugs. Are we ready for our first poll?
Yes, I just asked for it to be thrown up, so let's see how long it takes them.
All right.
IT is doing it on the back end for us.
Alrighty, just to kind of break it up a little bit, we should all be interested in knowing about our civic duty and whether or not we've exercised that at this point. So take a look at the poll on the screen and please answer. And as an FYI, if you're a host, you will not be able to answer the question. Or a panelist.
You might just have to give up on these. Catherine, did you want to go ahead and try?
There are some results.
See it.
There we have, okay, we've got a lot of early voters. This is awesome. And then got some folks that haven't had a chance to do so, but are planning to do so. Great. Okay. Now, panelists, get ready. We are going to ask that sort of what I call the lovely numbers question, right? I got that so many times. So please take a couple of moments and just write down your median Lsat and your median GPA. Okay. And so I'm going to ask, once you've done that, for each of my colleagues to go ahead and hold that up to the screen. Therefore, people will be able to see that, hopefully. If I could see it, all right. South Texas 152 and a 3.1. SMU 162, 3.73. Awesome. Baylor 161 and a 3.7. I see a 151 from Catherine, but I can't see the rest of it. 3.20. Okay, Terrence, I got a 160 and a 3.76. And Michelle, I'm going to ask you to unmute yours and just read it yourself. It's pretty small. I can't see it.
Sorry, the median LSAT is 149. The GPA is 324.
Awesome. Okay, Matthew at Texas got 168 and 3.76. Professor Owsley, LSAT 151, and got to manipulate that. Is that 3.19? Yep, got it. And Texas Tech 156 and a 3.56. All righty. And Dean Mensa 160 and a 3.57. Great. Panelists, if you'd like to go ahead and you can just put that information in the chat box so that we can keep going to some of the questions in the event that people were unable to see the screen. Okay, next question that I have is whether or not your institution has a part-time program. South Texas.
Yes, we do. And seeing that we enroll fall and spring, the part-time is only enrolled in fall.
Great, great response. SMU, part-time program or no? All righty, she's using that paper even though she wasn't asked. Love it. Dean Mensa from U of H.
Yes, we do have a part-time program. And in the first year, it's exclusively in the evening. After that, it can be, however the student wants to design their schedule.
Okay, Adam. part-time program?
We do have a part-time program. It's probably more accurate to describe it as a reduced course load program, to be honest with you. And it's during the day only.
Okay, thank you very much. Michelle, there a part-time program at your institution?
There is not.
Okay, and Catherine?
Yes, St. Mary's has a part-time evening program, Monday through Thursday, 6 to 9 p.m.
Awesome. Okay, and what about a Baylor?
We do not.
Texas Tech?
We do not.
Matthew, what about at your institution?
Unfortunately, we don't.
And Professor Owsley?
Yes, we have a part-time program in the evening. It's my understanding we're the only evening program in Dallas offering a part-time. Classes are principally, Monday through Thursday with some electives on the weekend. And it's a 4-year program.
Okay, alrighty. Thank you so much for sharing that. We had quite a few questions about clinical programs. Students are very interested in learning about the clinical program. So I will actually ask all of my colleagues to address this particular question. And let's start with Jill at SMU.
Sorry, I think somebody sent me something in the chat and I was looking at that. So you asked about our clinical programs?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so we have, I think right now, 11. We've been adding a lot recently. So do you want me to go through each one? Like not talk about it, but just list it?
Just kind of an overview would be great.
Okay, so we've got 11 different clinics. We've got a general civil law clinic, a consumer law clinic, criminal defense, criminal prosecution, child advocacy, family law, violence against women. We've got a criminal justice center / clinic. We've got an immigration and detention clinic, federal taxpayers, small business, and First Amendment. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you. All righty. St. Mary's, please share information.
So we have a civil clinic based on consumer protection, and then we have a family law clinic. We have a criminal defense clinic, immigration clinic. Right now, we're also running a housing helpline for those affected by the COVID. And then we have something called the Warrior Defense Project, which provides legal services to military members.
Okay, great. All righty. TSU, please.
Yes, we have the usual huge complement of clinics and experiential learning experiences, civil, criminal. We have judicial externships, legislative. I think that experiential learning is so popular that there are so many wonderful experiences, hundreds of opportunities for externships and such. We have the Earl Carl Institute, which is focusing on such things as inequity in the courts with Black girls, rent evictions. Those are some really big highlights for us.
Okay, very good. Let's see, A&M.
Quickly, community development clinic, criminal defense, entrepreneurship, family and veterans advocacy, immigration rights, our Innocence Project, tax dispute resolution clinic. We have a patent clinic, probate and estate planning clinic, and trademark and copyright clinic.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that. I just want to take a moment just to pause for a little bit. If time permits, we will be able to take questions outside of those that were previously submitted. That was the request when you registered. Additionally, some of the questions that I see popping up in the chat box, they have been answered, and so we won't be going back to those, unfortunately. So I'm going to ask that you not put questions in the chat box and let us get through these questions. And again, if time permits, we'll go over with other questions, and I also will be asking my colleagues to share their information at the conclusion of this session so that you might be able to reach out to them separately. Okay, thank you. All righty, who wants to go next? You just jump right in and explain a little bit about your clinics.
I haven't gone yet, so I'll go ahead and go. University of Houston has 7 different clinics, both the civil and criminal. immigration, mediation, consumer law. We also have a military justice clinic and our entrepreneurship clinic, which is much more transactional. All of these clinics are something that you can start getting involved with typically during your second year, possibly in the summer after your first year.
Awesome. Thank you. Matthew.
Here at Texas Law, we have about 15 clinics, and very similar to my colleagues, both in the civil and criminal space. I'll just highlight a couple based off of popularity and interest of our students. The immigration clinic tends to be pretty popular, as well as the actual innocence clinic, and the children's rights and the domestic violence clinic, where our students are partnering up with some of the local shelters and domestic violence nonprofits to help victims navigate that very complicated process. We actually have a new one starting up in the spring called Law and Religion through our Bethlehem First Amendment Center. And there the students will work on cases where individuals whose expression of their religion might be infringed upon in more restrictive environments. And so excited to have that come on board in the spring.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. All righty. Who'd like to go next?
I'll go. UNT Dallas has the Innocence Project that's sort of been referenced in the chat line or chat box. But essentially, we have one clinic, and our mission as a law school is to promote attorneys and availability of legal resources for low income and actually middle income folks in the community. And so our clinic operates along that line. We find that oftentimes we will have someone who has a family law matter, but then they'll have a housing matter or a criminal law matter. And so our clinic is designed to sort of be like a small law firm in the sense of you take what comes in the door and you help people where they need to be helped.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Okay. South Texas, did you have a chance to go?
I did not. We have 25 clinics, so I am not going to read them all because I can't. But highlights might be animal law, immigration, tax, domestic violence, human trafficking, and actual innocence. I'm not as with it as Matthew. I'm frantically trying to find a link I can post for all of you, but visit the website if I can't make that happen.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay. Did I leave anyone off? Texas Tech. Go ahead, Danielle.
We have 8 different clinics, family law, civil, criminal defense, which is located in Lubbock, then the public defense clinic, which is regional in our little area, capital punishment, innocence, family law and housing, and a mediation clinic as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I also haven't gone yet.
Okay.
Here at Baylor, we have a veterans clinic, an immigration clinic, a general trial advocacy clinic, a juvenile justice clinic, an intellectual property and entrepreneurship clinic, an estate planning clinic, an estate planning for first responders clinic, and a mini adoption clinic.
Interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. At this point, we're going to actually turn our attention to admissions sort of application type of questions. And then just so the panelists are aware, I will not be asking everyone. I'll be calling on 1 or 2 of you to answer this question. But in the event that your institution does something different, please let me know by unmuting yourself and feel free to speak. But before we do that, we are going to launch our next poll. Okay, a couple more seconds. All righty, there are results. Oh, large number of you are planning to apply for fall 2021, so this segment of the program will be definitely applicable for you. Okay, so that being said, We are going to start with Baylor. And the question is, does a below average LSAT score ruin your chances at getting into your desired school? Specifically
No,
Baylor.
no, definitely not. I mean, if you think of an average, or we talk about medians, half the class is coming in with below that LSAT score. So beyond just the number, you'll hear from every one of us that we all do a holistic look at applications. So yes, LSAT and GPA are important, but other things are important too. And I'm just going to go ahead and bust out my favorite metaphor for an application, which all of the co-panelists have heard me say a lot of times. I say the law school application is like an ice cream sundae. Your LSAT and your GPA are your 2 scoops of ice cream. You have to have some of that to have a strong application. One can be stronger than the other. Those give us a good foundation. Other things like work experience, extracurriculars, what classes you took, letters of recommendation, all of those extra things that we see in the application are the toppings. And then really the cherry on top, which can make or break an application, is the personal statement.
Great job, Jetty. Thank you. Well, I'm just going to move right to the next question based upon that answer. Awesome. Matthew, I'm going to ask you to respond to this question. Is graduate coursework and GPA reviewed in the application process? And second part, does it increase an applicant's chances of being accepted if they have a lower test scores but higher GPA?
So to the first part of the question, absolutely. I mean, when we are reviewing the application, we're not just looking at one part of the application. We're reviewing all of the transcripts that are submitted. So while your LSAC GPA, it is what it is. I think graduate education and the experience that students come with that and showcasing their academic potential is probably more relevant in some ways, just because that's more a recent history of the student's academic performance, right? And so that absolutely can sort of help assuage any concerns that the committee might have if the student comes in with an academic profile that might be below, the numbers, for example. To the second part of the question, can you remind me again? So sorry.
Yes, that's okay. Does it increase an applicant's chances of being accepted if they have lower test scores but a higher GPA? So that split that we often see.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly believe it helps, right? And as Dean Branson mentions, we're looking at the entire application holistically, right? Not one component in isolation. So if the question really is the student able to handle the rigors of law school, a solid performance in graduate education is certainly going to help make the case for that student that, this student will be able to handle law school in all of its form, right? So I think it certainly can, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next application type question, and we're going to turn that over to Catherine. And it is as follows. What are most law schools, such as yourself, looking for in a personal statement?
So I think with personal statements, we're looking for a solid story. If you have something that you're particularly passionate about, I think that's always well received. We definitely don't want to just see you include a longer version of your resume. If I'm looking for someone that says, oh, well, I did this and I did this and I did this, well, that's already on your resume. Instead, I'm looking for something different that would maybe help you stand out from other applicants, and that also shares with us why this is a good time perhaps to go to law school. Is there something you're particularly interested in or thinking about? Anything like that that can potentially set you apart from other applicants is always really good and really helpful to us, especially when we read thousands of personal statements. The other thing to keep in mind is that we don't want to see sloppy. We don't want to see messy. We don't want to see errors. And I think you'd be very surprised by the number of people that do submit personal statements that look like they haven't been read even a second time or haven't been critiqued by anybody. So that's always one of the things we say is please get somebody to critique your personal statement and tell you honestly if it reads well and if there are grammatical and spelling errors in it.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else that would like to add to any information that Catherine has shared regarding personal statements that might be unique to your institution?
I think we like to see why UNT Dallas, and I'm sure the other law schools probably also want to have an inkling of why this specific institution. I think we get a lot of applications where people are just scattershot and they're applying anywhere and everywhere, and that has its place and it works. But if you really want to talk about an institution, or if you really want to go to a place, you should explain why. And I agree with Catherine's point. Spell check is also your friend, so use that.
Thank you, Professor. Okay. Well, panelists, as a follow-up, the question is, do you have a specific prompt for your personal statement, or are students able to write about anything they want? And we'll just go one by one, starting with Texas Tech. Do you have a specific prompt?
We do not.
Matthew?
We don't.
Brian?
No.
Michelle, is there a specific prompt for TSU?
There is not, but I did want to add one thing to the last question. I think
Yes, ma'am.
the mistake that spell check will not catch is when the big finish says that they want to go to school X, but they're applying to school Y. Make sure you read that, because we see that a lot.
Excellent point. I can't tell you. I agree. How many personal statements I've read that says, "Oh, and it's the best school in the world. And please accept me to TSU," and I'm like, "Well, I'm at Houston." But okay, got it. Absolutely. And also, to Michelle's point, I would also share that spell check is not necessarily your friend if it's not the word that you mean. That's where that proofreading comes in that Catherine talked about. So the word trial and the word trail, I see it a couple times every admission cycle. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing that. Jenny at Baylor, is there a prompt?
There is not.
Okay, Terrence, is there a prompt in A&M?
We do not have a prompt. And can I add one other thing as well?
Absolutely.
Triggered something for me. The one thing that I like to, and sometimes it's a lot easier for us to talk about what not to do than it is to try to identify the perfect approach. And so I always like to caution students against oversharing and really being very thoughtful in the way that they're sharing information within their personal statements. Specifically, if you want to discuss a traumatic incident that may have occurred that may be driving you toward law school, we'd love to hear about those things, because motivating factors is a good thing also for a committee to consider. But be very cautious in terms of oversharing in regards to the amount of detail that you might be placing within the statement to describe that specific incident. I've seen some students step out and really horrify some of my committee members' tone of the statement and by the type of information being shared, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Okay, anyone else? Let's see. Alicia, I haven't heard from you.
Sorry, no prompt. It's a free for all.
Okay. Okay. Jill?
Same here. We want you to tell your story and write about anything that you want to write about.
Okay. Dean Mensa?
We sort of have a prompt. So it's very general, the personal statement, but there is a small portion that asks why you're interested in the University of Houston. But that can be a very short part of the personal statement, or even a very short addendum. Add, not part of your statement, but a little addendum explaining why University of Houston is a school you're interested in attending.
Okay. I don't think I left anybody off of this one. Next question, it's sort of a follow-up, if you will, along the same lines. What about interviews? Are interviews required and or allowed? Let's start with South Texas.
We do not have interviews. That is actually what your personal statement is for, as far as we're concerned. So.
Makes sense. Dean Mensa from U of H?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
We don't have interviews. I'll answer for
We
you.
do not have interviews. No, we don't have interviews.
All right, no problem. Okay, Jill, what about SMU? Interviews?
No, we do not.
Okay. St. Mary's,
No, no interviews.
A&M?
No official interviews, but I will tell you, every single time you come into contact with an admissions committee member or staff member, they're always interviewing you. So always be on, be respectful, always.
Okay, that's an excellent point that you make. Jenny, what about Baylor? Interviews required and/or allowed?
We have optional interviews. You can find about those on our website.
Okay. Professor Owsley?
Generally, no. I think if you are coming, having been at a law school previously, then it's required.
Okay. Danielle?
None at Texas Tech, no interviews.
Matthew?
So we do invite students to interview. Not everyone is invited, however, but that's the distinction between those students who kind of set up a meeting with Texas Law in the same vein of my colleagues. So if you have an interaction with us, that doesn't count as your interview. You have to be invited to it.
Okay, very well, thank you. And TSU? Interviews?
We don't have evaluative interviews unless have been to law school previously. The committee may ask for such, but we certainly do have advising individual conversations in Zoom. So while it's not an interview, one should always remember that we do remember. And to the points that have been made, be especially respectful to those people who answer the phone and that you may not suspect may have any input into your application, because you'd be surprised how often they do.
That's an excellent point, Michelle, regarding people that you may come into contact with that may not necessarily be the admissions decision makers, but those folks who answer the phone and things like that. That's a great point. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, I have a specific question as it relates to UH and UTs, or so this individual thinks, and here it goes. I took the August Lsat Flex, and I'm taking it again in November. The projected score release date is November 24th, which is after UH's and UT's early decision deadlines. Is it possible to submit and be considered for early decision, but not judged until my later LSAT score? Matthew?
Yeah, so yes, you can. So when we created our policies for the early decision program, you have to understand that a lot of this is done way in advance. And obviously, we are in this period where a lot of things are changing, not only within the law school, but also on LSAC's side as well. I think under normal conditions, we would have said you have to have your application in with everything complete by November 1st. But given the fact that, LSAC is pushing out the test scores a lot sooner than they used to, I feel confident that we'd be able to review the candidate, even if they have a November 24th score. So the short answer is just make sure that you get in your application by November 1st. And if you do have any existing scores, then just email the admissions team to let us know to wait until your November score comes in so that we'll consider it.
And my answer would be exactly the same. Our early decision is November 15th. That's the only difference. But same thing, have that in have the actual application in by that deadline. And then if you do already have a score, we ask that you email the office and just let us know to hold on to it. We try to look for that to see if someone already has a score or has registered for another exam, but it's still just really nice for you to let us know so we can make sure to put it on hold until the new score comes in.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dean Mensa. Still keeping our attention on sort of the application process, we have some resume type questions. And so I'm going to start this question with Texas Tech. What length should my resume be?
What length? Is that what the question was?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One, double check the instructions on the application. Some schools will limit it to 1 page. Some will limit it to 2. Some don't have a limit. At Tech, we don't have a limit. Typically for students that are coming directly out of undergrad, there's really no reason that it would be more than a page and a half. If you've been in the working world or have been in a professional capacity that you needed a CV, we can understand a little bit longer than that. But typically you want to specifically focus on highlighting experiences and opportunities that would be relevant to skills necessary for the law school. So if you have it, it's 3 pages, but you've spent a lot of time just kind of all over the place, maybe narrow it into the areas where you showed leadership, you showed speaking skills, you showed writing skills, you showed teamwork, project management, and things like that that would be relevant. So for tech, I would recommend probably keeping it to 2-page max, but generally look at the instructions and use your best judgment.
Thank you. As a follow-up to the resume question, Terrence, the question is, how do you feel about hyperlinks in a resume?
Wow. I typically won't click on them unless it's something incredibly interesting. Occasionally I've been known to go in and click on a LinkedIn account. If I see a hyperlink, it might pique my curiosity and I might wonder why you put it there. But I'm gonna feel differently if it's a waste of time if I'm ultimately clicking there. The best example I can think of is I had a dance major put a link in her resume, and it was an actual performance. And she was from Atlanta, Georgia. It was a link to an actual dance recital and performance. And I remember when she actually came to visit the law school, I actually chased her down the hall and said, "Hey, you're the one that sent me the dance performance." Occasionally it works, but for the most part, the admissions committee members aren't clicking on hyperlinks. I'm probably not clicking on hyperlinks unless it's something that just piques my curiosity.
Thank you, Terrence. I'm just going to open that one up to all the other panelists. If you have something different, I would agree with Terrence as well. I don't have time to click on hyperlinks. We have a lot of material that we have to get through. But if someone else has a different thought about it, please unmute yourself and share.
The only thing I might add about a resume, and I think some of my colleagues have said this on other panels we've been on together, but if you are working, especially during school, and you feel that that has impacted your performance in school, I think it's a good idea, or maybe it did impact and you're out of school now, put the number of hours that you're working in those positions. Because I think, if you are trying to explain maybe a less competitive GPA because you were holding down a full-time job, maybe you can that can be reflected on your resume versus assuming it might have been a little part-time gig to help you have some extra money. So I think that's helpful if you were working during school and it might have impacted your performance, or not. You worked a full-time job and did really well. So put those sorts of details on there so that we have that at our at the ready.
Alrighty, makes sense. Thank you so much. Okay, this relates to standardized testing scores, the GRE versus the Lsat. And so I would like each of my colleagues to share whether or not your particular institution accepts the GRE. I know that we all don't. And so let's start with Matthew.
We do accept the GRE. We started in 2018. And so this year was actually the first year that we had 4 students who enrolled with the GRE. So we look forward to doing studies on their performance in the first year, and so that we can share more broadly.
Okay, thank you very much. TSU.
No, we do not take the GRE.
Okay, Texas Tech.
We do not take the GRE.
All righty, Professor Owsley. No, he's shaking his head. I think no.
Sorry, no. No.
Okay, Ginny, what about Baylor?
We do not.
Okay, A&M.
Yes, we do accept the GRE. We have for a number of years now. The one caveat I will tell you is, as you're hearing from our colleagues, you hear a lot of no's. So LSAT is still the golden standard in regards to school admissions, and it's still going to provide you with the most opportunity and flexibility in regards to schools you apply to and opportunities to attend. But we will accept the GRE. We don't have a preference in regards to GRE versus LSAT.
Okay, thank you so much. St. Mary's.
No, we do not accept the GRE.
SMU.
We do accept the GRE, and I want to add one additional sort of warning, like Terrence just shared, for students who haven't taken a test yet. Keep in mind, it's not for the GRE accepting schools. You can't take the GRE and take the LSAT and pick which one you like better. If you have an LSAT score, we must use the LSAT score for admissions if we are a GRE accepting school. So it's not a pick the one that you did best on. So think carefully.
Great point. Great distinction. South Texas.
We do not currently, but that is a hot topic right now. And I have a feeling that probably by fall 21, that I predict that will be in place, that we will be accepting. So I'm putting money on it. So.
Okay. And Dean Mensa.
No, we don't currently accept the GRE. It is something we're in conversation about and maybe something we'll start accepting in fall 2022.
Okay, great. Well, I think it's time for another poll. If you just take a look at your screen, we want some information about fall 2021. Okay, a couple more seconds to get your vote in. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, 92%. Awesome. And then we have a small contingent of folks who are not actually planning to attend fall 2021. Okay. We talked a little bit about COVID, but I know some folks are back. I noticed my colleague Jill indicated that they've been back since June. She hasn't been home, but I just want to clarify. The question is, are there any in-person visits being allowed currently? So South Texas, in-person visits right now?
We are not.
Okay.
We're virtual at the moment. So yes.
Okay, Dean Mensa?
No, we're not having in-person visits right now, but speaking personally, and I'm sure for my colleagues as well, there's still a lot of opportunities for you to learn about the different schools and institutions. We've all ramped up our websites and have virtual tours and class visit, or maybe class recordings that you can watch, info sessions, panels like this. So while, we can't actually have you on campus at the moment, there's still a lot of opportunity to learn about the school. And I'm sure we're all happy to, as admissions office, put you in contact with different constituents of the law schools, whether that's current students or alumni or faculty, to also reach out and talk to you and give you a better idea of what to expect at our individual institutions.
Thank you. I'll ask my colleagues if your institution is currently allowing in-person visits. Can you please come off mute and share that information?
St. Mary's is. We're doing our visits on Fridays because that is the day that we have the least amount of students on campus. We're limiting to one family friend group at a time. And you can email us to schedule that if you want to come take a look.
Okay, great. Maybe you can drop that in the chat box if you can, Catherine.
We at Baylor also offering in-person visits on particular days, and it's just a student and one visitor. And I'll drop the link to that information in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jenny.
SMU
Anyone else?
SMU also, obviously, we've been open since June. So we have been, we take visits every day of the week, guided tours, one-on-one meetings, socially distanced, masked up. And we are not taking people currently into first year classes. And so class visits are still being done virtually for us. Okay. And I'll put my link in the chat too.
Thanks, Jill. Appreciate that. All righty. Another question about the Lsac. How do you all view taking the Lsac more than once? I'm going to have Professor Owsley handle that question.
So I've been on the admissions committee for a number of years. So, I mean, I think if someone has taken it 4 times, let's say, which I've seen, and 3 of the scores are low and comparable, and then the other time is significantly higher. In theory, people say that the high score is what prevails, but I think 3 low scores is going to be say something as well. And so I would be wary of taking it a lot of times and consistently showing a low score if you need a certain higher score. That being said, if I see a high score and a low score and that's it, I tend to go with the high score.
Okay. Anyone else would like to comment on taking the LSAT more than once?
I think I would. I think it's a matter of judgment. And I think law schools, certainly I'm looking always at an applicant's judgment if they show in so many different ways in the application. And I think it's very clear when an applicant goes in if they've taken it more than once, we can see perhaps a very big disparity in scores, and it lets us know that that applicant perhaps used poor judgment and didn't prepare for the first time. I've also seen people get cocky and they've taken the test and do really well. They go back and take it again and do very poorly because they did nothing else to continue their preparation. So for me, it's a matter of judgment. And I think it begs an explanation when I see a big disparity in scores between tests. So you're sort of setting yourself up, and I think you need to use good judgment in making those decisions.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to add one thing as well with that, kind of along the same vein. If you are unhappy with your score and considering taking it again, give yourself enough time to study and prepare before you take it again. Because now, especially with LSAC offering so many additional LSATs, it may not make sense to take the very next one on the calendar. Maybe take the one after that to give yourself a couple of months in between. Maybe even take a break from the LSAT study for a week or two. Let your brain kind of reset and start over. Give yourself time to study, because you don't want to take it again a second time and do worse than you did the first time. You definitely want that improvement. So give yourself the chance and the opportunity to study so you can have that improvement.
Thank you, Dean Mensa. I am going to ask Matthew to respond to another LSAT question. What's the best way to study for the LSAT?
Oh, that's a good one. The problem is there isn't a one size fits all for everyone, right? We have students who tell us that they, walked into the LSAT with very little preparation and was able to perform well, and that's fantastic for them. There are some students who, they're signing up for a private prep course, and that is their mode for preparation. And I think it just depends on the student and an understanding of what their learning habits are and their learning style, because you very well benefit from a private course, right? Because it's more structured if you're working full time, but obviously there's a cost to that, right? Many of these private test prep companies, cost upward to $2,000 to $3,000, for each course. But other students, again, depending on their studying habits and their time commitments and their ability to really commit to the study, and as Dean Mensa mentioned, like just really preparing for the exam, they may very well just do some light studying with the book, right? Buying a book at Barnes and Nobles, or LSAC now offers free test prep opportunities through the Khan Academy. So we would encourage students to really start there. So one of the things that I tell students is that if you are thinking about taking a test prep course, then you can sign up for one of their mock tests, right? They administer this just to kind of see what your baseline is. Of course, you'll have to sit down and listen to their marketing spiel because they really want you to sign up for their course. But you can take that score and kind of see, where your scoring is, at the moment, right? If you're already scoring and you're very happy, with the score, then perhaps all you need to do is really supplement your studies in that way. But if you're not scoring and you're not happy with that score, then perhaps, taking, a different different approach might be important. So the unfortunate thing is it just kind of depends, but there are certainly different ways to prepare for the exam, not just the self-study, but certainly again, with the private test companies.
Thank you, Matthew. This next question, I'm going to toss it over to Alicia, South Texas. And if her answer is different for your particular institution, when she's complete, please unmute yourself and respond. And the question is, are the in-state residency requirements different between schools? And is there a way to petition for in-state residency? Please advise.
Well, since I'm private, this is not applicable to me.
Right.
So I'm going to toss that question to one of my state schools.
Who wants to go for it? All right, Matthew, you're going to go for it.
I'm happy to take this one. So remind me again, it's just the residency question and how you become a Texas resident.
Yeah.
So in the state of Texas, so us and some other of my colleagues here are required to enroll a class of 65% of the incoming cohort. And I make the distinction between enrolled versus admit because the majority of our applicant pool is actually non-resident. And so, the switch, however, of course, are the students who decide to enroll. And of course, we're just going to do well in our backyard. A lot of our students are going to come from the state of Texas, partly because of the affordable tuition, that students are obviously thinking about in their decision making. But when it comes to the Texas residency, you essentially assign yourself your residency based off of what you think you are in the application process. And then what ends up happening in the processing of the application is that our program coordinator will actually ascertain whether you're actually a Texas resident or not. And if there's any question to your residency, she'll flag you as a questionable. And so then what ends up happening is the student has to go and fill out a form just to make sure that they actually are indeed a Texas resident. Are there ways to become a Texas resident? Absolutely. And the general guideline is that you actually have to move to the state of Texas 1 year before the day of enrollment, right, begins. But it's not moving into the state of Texas. There are actually other legal requirements as well. And so I'm happy to link to our page where it's a little bit more information about that.
Thank you, Matthew, for sharing that. Is there anyone else who would like to add? Matthew did a great job, but is there anything that someone else would like to add to that?
I'll jump in quickly and I'll say most individuals that are non-residents, because of what Matthew's just outlined, it's incredibly difficult to gain residency, especially if you're just moving to Texas for purposes of school, even if you have an intent to stay after you graduate. Some of our institutions, certainly here at Texas A&M, we have the opportunity to provide what's called a non-resident tuition waiver. So a lot of our students that are incredibly competitive and they're going to be receiving some type of gift aid in forms of scholarships, grants, things of that nature, might have the opportunity to get one of these non-resident tuition waivers. And for Texas A&M, it's as simple as receiving a merit-based scholarship in the amount of $1,000 or more. And that automatically qualifies you to pay in-state tuition rates. Now, I will say you will be paying the equivalent of in-state tuition rates with that competitive scholarship. You'll still be charged the non-resident rates. And so essentially you're getting two scholarships here. You're getting the merit-based scholarship awarded by the School of Law in combination with what we're calling a non-resident tuition waiver at Texas A&M, which is basically the differential between in-state and out-of-state tuition. So most of our non-residents that are highly competitive are going to receive some type of merit-based scholarship, and then we're going to add on that non-resident tuition waiver. So the takeaway is you're paying resident rates, and that's going to be renewable at Texas A&M.
Thank you, Terrence. You just actually stole my thunder for my next question about scholarships, but that's okay. It's a great segue. But before I actually raise the question, I'm going to ask Dean Mensah, is there anything that you would like to add relative to this subject? We're somewhat similar to what Terrence spoke about at A&M.
Right. I was just going to say we're basically the same as Dean Cook just mentioned. Our non-residents, as long as they get a minimum of $1,000 scholarship, then that non-resident tuition is waived, and they would be paying that in-state tuition as well. So we really don't have students that are paying the non-resident rates. But generally, I think that's something to think about and consider as you're applying to law schools. You know, you may look at the price difference and question whether or not you should apply to a particular school, but you don't know what their scholarship policies are, and you don't know what they may be offering. So I wouldn't so much let the pricing, the tuition pricing, discourage you from applying, because you just don't know what sort of financial aid packages and scholarships you'll receive from the institution.
Thank you, Dean Mensa. And
Sorry, I
while
just
we're,
want to add that at Texas Tech, we have the same $1,000 out-of-state tuition waiver as well. So all of our out-of-state folks are similarly paying in-state tuition.
okay. In terms of scholarship, though, I'm actually going to go back to Dean Mensa, and then I'll actually go through the line of all of my colleagues to talk about whether or not there are merit-based or need-based scholarships available at your particular institution. Dean Mensa.
Yes. So the University of Houston, we have a merit-based scholarship that's given upon application, to our incoming 1Ls. There isn't anything that an applicant needs to do to be considered for this merit-based scholarship. If you are admitted to our program, we will automatically consider you for this scholarship. It is renewable for the time that you're at the law center. So if you're in our full-time program, it would be renewable for 3 years. If you're in our part-time program, for 4 years. In order to maintain the scholarship, you just need to remain in good standing with the institution. Good standing is typically about a 2.33 GPA, so it's very possible to maintain that scholarship. Word of advice, that is something that you should look at when considering scholarships from different institutions. What do you have to do? What GPA do you have to maintain in order to keep your scholarship? But the merit base is the only one that we do offer at this time, and so it's consideration of your cumulative GPA as well as your Lsat score.
Thank you, Dean Mensa. South Texas, can you explain your sort of scholarship structure?
Certainly. So the Dean's Merit Scholarship is the one and only scholarship that we do automatically offer to any student admitted. It is based on LSAT and undergraduate GPA. It's sort of a grid. So it's anywhere from $2,000 based on the lower end of the grid up to $15,000. And again, it is automatic and there's nothing that an applicant need to do. They will be assessed and awarded the scholarship automatically, and it will come in their admission email.
Thank you. Jill, what about SMU?
So at SMU, about 85+% of our students receive some form of scholarship each year. The vast majority of those scholarships are what we call Dean's scholarships, and those are awarded based primarily on merit, but also on, the holistic file review. And those are awarded generally at the time of admission, unless you are admitted extremely early and I don't have a budget yet. So for instance, if you're admitted in the fall semester prior to when you're going to start, you'll get your scholarship decision a bit later. All of those Dean scholarships have a good standing maintenance requirement, which at SMU is a 2.0. We do have a couple of private scholarships that do require separate applications, but rather than, I know we've got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to drop the link to those in the chat so people can look at them there.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Matthew, what's going on at Texas in terms of scholarship?
So the majority of our scholarships are merit-based scholarships, but we do have some need-based grants available. So we do strongly encourage students to submit the FAFSA, which is available beginning October 1st. And similar to SMU, we do have some other scholarships that are not tied to merit, but more on sort of like public service. And so we have two full ride scholarship scholarships that require a separate application for those.
Okay, thank you. St. Mary's.
So the majority of our scholarships are merit-based. And then as some of the other schools have stated, students, once they're admitted, are automatically considered for those merit-based scholarships. And then we do have what are called presidential leadership scholarships, which are some higher amount, all the way up to full tuition scholarships that are a separate application. And the process for that can be found on our website.
Thank you. A&M.
We are primarily merit-based. There is no separate application required. good academic standing, which is a 2.33 for us.
Thank you. What about Baylor?
Like what a lot of my colleagues have said, primarily merit-based. About 92% of our students come in on scholarship. The average is about 32,000, I think, this year. You're eligible for those just by submitting your application. We do have a 275 renewal level for the second and third year. And then we have 3 applications that you can, or 3 scholarships that you can apply for separately. One if you were in any sort of undergraduate advocacy, and then a couple others if you went to either Abilene Christian or Texas A&M as an undergrad.
Thank you. Professor Owsley?
We, I think roughly about 2/3 of our students get some kind of aid. It's typically merit aid. It's not a large amount. Our in-state tuition is about $18,000, and I think the average grant that students receive is about $2,000.
Thank you, sir. Texas Tech.
Sure, thank you. We similarly do merit-based scholarships. Typically around 80% of our incoming students have an award of some amount. I would say in addition to, and there is no additional application, we're looking at your initial law school application. I would say in addition to all of the opportunities that my colleagues have mentioned, definitely keep an eye out for external opportunities. There are a ton of scholarships just living on the internet for incoming law students. So that's and not a lot of people apply to those. So it's a great way to kind of supplement any awards that you may receive from any of these schools.
Thanks, Danielle. And what about TSU?
Well, lest applicants who are watching this think that everything rests on the LSAT, one of the things I want to point out is that when we do look at the need component for applicants to law school, there's very little disparity. Everybody has a need. And there's so little to distinguish between. So yes, we have scholarships that range from up to a Dean's scholarship, which is a full tuition scholarship and includes the Dean's Leadership Council. One of the things that we do is give our scholarships in terms of a % of tuition. Currently, and that means that if tuition increases, so does your scholarship. It doesn't decrease as things get more expensive. Currently, TSU is the least expensive cost of attendance in Texas. And I say that because I think applicants make the mistake of looking at the dollars and they don't really compare the cost of attendance, which is essential. And the formula is actually quite simple, but people make it very complicated. So rather than looking at the big number, you simply take the cost of attendance of each school, subtract the scholarship to get your net cost, and that way you'll know what you're really paying for law school.
Great, thank you, Michelle. I want to turn our attention a little bit back to COVID-19 and the havoc that it's wreaked on not just everyday life, but law school admissions, law school courses. And I know a number of students have raised questions about how will law school courses be taught. We've talked about a number of us not having on-campus visits, currently trying to do a lot of more things virtually. And so a number of students have raised the question regarding whether or not we have any information about how classes will be conducted for the fall 2021 and beyond. Specifically, 2 students raised the question, since we had to go to online in the spring, and since most law schools are doing some type of hybrid learning right now, do you see online courses as being a wave of the future for law school? And I will start with Michelle from TSU.
I think it's interesting times. I think we have learned a tremendous amount. I think everybody has, whether it's legal education or how to practice law. So I think some of this is a wave of the future, but I don't think online teaching is what we're going to see a great deal of. We're happy with what's happening. I think it's teaching our students how they may practice law in the future, because I don't think law firms are ever going to go back to making every client come in. So I think there's a lot to be learned, and I think schools have handled this pretty well considering what's happening. But next fall is so far in the future. I wouldn't hazard a guess, but I can't imagine this is, hopefully we'll have a vaccine and this will all be behind us. But I think there's a lot that we've learned that we can do virtually, and hope we will continue to do some of that.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Professor Owsley, what are your thoughts on the wave of the future and online learning relative to law school?
I hope not. I think in talking to my colleagues and in my own experience, I think students are best served generally by being in the classroom. I think that some of our students are not as engaged, and I'm able to see students that I had in class live compared to online. And keep in mind, my school, everyone has the option. The students have the option, the professors have the option of whether they're going to be online or live. Most of our professors next semester are going to be in the classroom. And I anticipate that even as we don't have a vaccine in the fall of 2021, that we will still be moving that trend. But I think there are things to be learned from our online experience. I think we will do other things, utilize online in some ways, but I think we're selling our students short if we're not in class as much as possible.
Thank you, Professor. I appreciate that. Well, it's interesting. We got the perspective in terms of online classes from the sort of administrative side, if you will, but we're interested in what students might be thinking, assuming we have to go in that direction. So it's time for another poll regarding what you might choose as students if law school courses are taught online for the fall 2021. Okay. A couple more seconds. Get your vote in. Okay. Alrighty, we have the majority of law school courses are taught online. The majority of you would still attend. There's some that wouldn't. And some folks are still undecided, which I can definitely appreciate that. Again, thanks for providing us that feedback. I want to turn our attention to what's been termed as our non-traditional law student, if you will, or non-traditional applicant. And so this series of questions will specifically focus on that group. I'm going to start with Jenny. And one of the questions that was raised is, I'm over 40 years old. I'm interested in starting a new career, a new pathway. What advice would you have for me?
Well, first of all, that's excellent. We want you here. I think we all have students from every age range, and questions that we frequently get are, am I going to be the oldest one? Now, if you're in your 40s and 50s, you are going to be on the older end, but our average ages typically are not right at that 21 and 22. So we have people from a broad variety of backgrounds, and we want a broad variety of backgrounds. So getting back to my advice for you, I'd say in the application process, make sure you highlight what traits that you're bringing to law school. So, your work ethic and working with the team and handling different perspectives and, balancing things. I mean, there's a whole list of things that you're going to bring to a law school community. As far as kind of advice for you on what you can do to prepare, obviously make sure you give yourselves lots of time for the Lsat, because you presumably have been out of undergrad for quite some time. Admissions committee are going to care a lot about that Lsat or that GP or that GRE. So make sure you give yourself a lot of time, particularly since you might not have taken a standardized test in a while. It might take you a little more time. Get in the habit of reading a lot if that's not something that you do in, regularly. I think a lot of times our students that have been out of college for a while, when they get back into law school, the constant reading and writing can be a little bit of a challenge for them. But I think my biggest piece of advice is, know that we want you here, and that you're not kind of the odd one out, and know that you deserve to be here. I think sometimes we see kind of second career students second guess themselves a little bit, and they feel very much that imposter syndrome. So get that out of your head, and then really just give yourself enough time to put in the best application you can.
Thanks, Jenny. As a follow-up, Jill, what can older and retired people do to help their chances of getting accepted into law school?
So I don't think it's any different for students depending on their age. We want to see great academics, LSAT, GPA, GRE in some cases, and we want to see a strong file, all the things we've highlighted today, a great personal statement, a great resume, good letters of recommendation. I think you have, when you've been out and doing things for a while, I think you kind of in some ways have a leg up on the resume side of things, because you're going to have a more robust resume. You're not worried about how am I going to fill this thing up, because you've done a lot of things. And I would say on that piece, particularly if you've done something sort of technical, maybe you're an engineer or something like that, make sure you, add some detail on that resume where we will be as impressed as we should be. We're not going to be intimately familiar with every type of career that exists in the world. So we may not understand as well as we should the things that you've done. So make sure you give us enough information so that we are adequately impressed with your accomplishments.
Thank you, Jill. Sort of same area of questioning, Alicia. The next question is, how should a non-traditional student tailor their resume for the application?
I think it goes back to a little bit of what Dean Nykerk just mentioned. Where I would anticipate, if you're a non-traditional student, that your resume is going to have more things in it and on it. And so if it's we're looking for promotability, not big gaps. You don't have to go as far back. I don't think if you're non-traditional, please don't go to high school, any of you, back to high school employment. And especially if you're a non-traditional student, we could be looking at pages and pages. But I think, you will want to put your best foot forward. Again, yours may be a little bit longer. And we will be looking for, again, promotability and consistency and things like that in a resume. And I've also mentioned to people when I've done this sorts of things before, if there's something specific to you in your resume that one of us might not be familiar with, whether that's an organization that you're involved with, or particular award or accolade that's very impressive, or it might not be common, maybe give a little blurb about what it is, because I want to make sure that I'm recognizing something really exciting or positive or interesting in your resume. And I'm not familiar with what you're telling me. I might need a brief description of what that means or looks like, or so that it can impress me as much as you want it to.
Thanks so much. Michelle, continue the same line of questioning. Do you have any advice for students who will be married when going into law school?
Yes, I'd be delighted to give some advice. The first advice I give to the spouse is don't keep count of how many times your spouse took out the trash or diapered the baby. It sounds a little humorous, but both of you are going to law school, whether you realize it or not. And it has to be a partnership. It takes some real understanding of the partner to see that the pendulum is going to swing very far to one side, for at least the first semester, while your partner is trying to figure this out. Because part of being successful in law school is learning how to do law school. It's a different language. It's just, we're social animals. We're trying to make friends. We're doing so many things that are different. And as much as wearing a particular shirt when you gave your spouse two, or your partner two, and why is he wearing one and not the other? pass the salt. Well, why are you not passing the pepper? It's just a different kind of experience. I do suggest that when times are better and you're able to visit the law school, if you are married or in a relationship, make yourself known. Get to know the people that your partner is spending so much time with. You're going to hear the same names over and over again. It's going to cause you to wonder if your spouse or your partner is really studying. So it's really important. And if you have children, I think it's extremely important to take those children to the law school. The example that person in law school is setting for your children is an amazing thing. I think it's important to understand that everybody in that family is contributing to the success of that student. So that's the advice I would give.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I want to switch gears just a little bit, and this is specifically about the 2021 application cycle. Dean Mensah, is the 2021 application cycle likely to be more or less competitive for Texas law schools?
That's an interesting question. And I think right now, applications, they're predicting and trending that we're going to see an increase in applications for this fall 2021 season. I don't think, at least because I've been on other panels with several other of the deans on this in this session, I think we've all kind of shared that we don't really expect to see a difference in our class size. So like the pandemic isn't going to make the class sizes smaller or anything like that. We still want to bring in our similar class sizes. So, if you have a competitive application, like in any other admission cycle, it's going to be, you're going to be successful and get into one of the schools of your interest. I wouldn't really worry so much about the numbers and how many applications are being sent in, nationwide, and just more focus on what you need to do to make your application the strongest. And cast your net wide, apply to several different schools with different profiles. And you'll have options, I think, at the end of the day, and you'll be able to make a decision on what law school is best for you. Angela, you're on mute if you're talking. But that's the end of my answer. Anyone else want to add anything? I'm not sure what happened. Oh, there she goes. Are you there?
Oh, could you not hear me, Matthew?
No, we lost you. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Sorry. How is COVID-19 affecting OCI opportunities for students? That's part one. And are firms changing their hiring practices for the foreseeable future, if you know?
Oh gosh, this is a tough one. It's certainly out of my element, but before the cycle began, we invited our Dean for Career Services, David Montoya, to come speak to the admissions committee, and also to the admissions team, just to get a sense from him what was happening on his end. And I probably could characterize it as they still don't know. Right. And part of it is as the law schools are navigating this sort of new environment, so are the law firms, and so are the career services offices. But what we do know is that obviously the on-campus interviewing process has been moved to the spring for the first years. But again, sort of the unknown is how long this is going to impact the OCI process for the next cycle, right? And so I think in the most immediate sense, the CSO folks are just, really focusing on getting the OCI process for the current 2Ls, set up for the spring, and then they'll focus on the first year students, so the current 1Ls. But I would say that, he seemed to think that, the law firms really learned after the 2008 recession, where a lot of the firms sort of scaled back their hiring practices. And then what ended up happening is that then there ended up being sort of a dearth of sort of, the associates down in the pipeline. And so he had some confidence that they were not going to do that in this environment, right? But of course, the OCI process is going to look a lot differently, right? I don't suspect, we're going to have in person. A lot of this is going to be virtual. And in fact, we just received an advisory from our travel department yesterday that all travel for us, at least, will be extended through, the end of 2021. So that right there tells you that I don't anticipate a lot of people traveling, even if things were to pick back up. So, that's all the information that I have really on the career services. But kind of tying into some of the comments that we made earlier, I think what our 1Ls, in particular, the students are thinking about law school, are very cognizant of is sort of the need to be nimble and flexible throughout this entire process, right? And there's still a lot of unknowns that we're still trying to figure out for ourselves.
Thank you so much, Matthew. In the interest of time, I have more questions, and they don't necessarily have a theme. So I will just be asking different panelists just to address probably one question each. And we'll just kind of keep going from there. I tried to group the questions together, but now I think we're kind of running out of themes. So we're going to start with A&M. And the question for you is, excuse me, what sort of extracurriculars or internships do you see most often coming from incoming students?
Wow. I've seen everything, especially from A&M undergraduates. They're so active, so involved in so many different areas. Pursuing their passions and their personal interests is what I highly encourage, and that's what I see students doing. If I can reframe this, I get a lot of, do I have to intern, extern, work at a law firm before going to law school? And I will tell you that the answer to that question is no. But what I will also tell you is that sometimes interning, externing at a law firm gives you insight into whether or not law school or the career of law is best for you. So it can serve you well in the sense of, especially if you don't come from a family of lawyers, you don't have connections to a lot of lawyers in terms of knowing what law school or knowing what the practice of law actually is. That type of internship, externship can give you the insight in terms of informing your decision to apply to law school and ultimately practice. But I like to see longevity in terms of activities. So it doesn't really matter to me what it is that you're doing. Your level of engagement is going to be important. And then over a sustained period of time, I'd love to see that as well. So think quantity versus, think quality versus quantity rather.
Okay, thank you, Terrence. Let's see, Danielle, this question's for you. Will choice of major be considered in the admissions process? I am a STEM major, and I was wondering if the type of classes I took during undergrad and their level of difficulty will be taken into consideration.
The short answer is yes, that's kind of part of the holistic review process. Is it going to be the make it or break it? Not necessarily, but I think that the folks on all of our admissions committees are going to be looking at your transcripts and seeing, molecular biology and all these classes that we ourselves probably never took, and understanding that that is a different type of class, a different type of thinking. And so it may be viewed a little bit differently, but, if it's a pretty, low GPA, that's something that we're still going to also have to take into consideration. Again, also looking at the classes that you're taking, if we see like you were a STEM major and you did phenomenal in all your STEM classes, and then you had writing classes and you were seeing C's and D's, maybe an F, that's something we're also going to take into consideration. So it's kind of part of the holistic process, but we are definitely considering different majors.
Okay. Thank you. Professor Owsley, this question's for you. How does the law school view applicants who are interested in joint degree programs?
I think the short answer at UNT Dallas is we don't, because currently we don't have joint degree programs. So
Okay.
It might be better to ask one of my colleagues on the panel.
Let's throw that to somebody else. No worries. This is still informative. Dean Mensah. Your thoughts on that?
The question is how we view someone who applies and expresses that they're interested in a dual degree.
Yes.
Okay. I would say we're not really going to look at you any differently. In terms of applying to more than one program within the university, you know, the application process is separate. So when you're applying to the law school, we're going to look at you and view you just like we would any other applicant that's interested in attending our law school. We do ask the question, and it's more of like an interest to know that you might be wanting to do a dual degree, but it's not going to, I would say, like advance your application or make you more likely to be admitted because you've expressed interest in another program.
Okay. My next question is specifically for St. Mary's and Texas Law. I think we've kind of covered it, but I'm going to go ahead and, since they asked for these two institutions specifically, how do you evaluate GPA? Do you take in consideration major honors program, challenging courses, difficulty of courses? And so I'll let St. Mary's respond first, and then Matthew respond next. And I will say, whatever they tell you, I'm sure it applies for all of the institutions, but go ahead.
Yes, so I think definitely we do look at all of that. We take into account everything. I do typically, I'm curious to know if, you know, how someone performed in their major and their classwork. We do get copies of all the transcripts that you've submitted through Lsac. So there are some times where I'm very thorough and look through every single class and want to see everything. And there's other times where there's not really any red flags that cause me to want to do that. So yes, I mean, all of that is taken into account.
Thank you. Matthew, you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So very similar in that, you know, it's not just an evaluation of the LSAT and the GPA alone, right? A 3.5 from one institution may not very well be a 3.5 for another institution. One of the things that LSAC does is when you submit your transcripts to them, they process it for those of us who didn't attend your respective undergraduate institution. So what I like to see is I like to look at the percentile that LSAC offers to us to kind of compare you to other similarly situated students, right? Because, you know, there are sometimes institutions that will inflate grades, and then oftentimes institutions will deflate grades, right? And so that percentile matters a lot to us in the evaluation process. The other thing that we're looking for is, again, just not the GPA alone, but the end result, but more sort of the process, right? Are there upward grade trends? Are there downward grade trends, right? And so it's very nuanced in the evaluation process.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, and then I actually, before I ask these last two questions, I have a question of the participants, and so it's time for our next poll. Oh no, are we having technical difficulties here? Let's see.
I see Ed is on the.
There we go.
Yeah.
All righty. Just take a couple seconds and answer that.
I think that's the same poll that you guys did.
Oh yeah, it is. Oh, that's right. No, this poll, yeah, that is correct. That's not the question. You know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to ask this last question. There it is. Okay, thank you. I know the majority of folks on the call indicated that they were planning to attend in fall 2020-21. Just wondering if you've taken the LSAT or when you plan to take the LSAT. Okay, got 51% have already taken it. Next largest group planning to take it again in November. And okay, awesome. Alrighty, the last question that I have, and we are getting close to our ending time, I'm going to give this to St. Mary's, and it is, How would international students be evaluated, considering the fact that LSAC will not provide a numerical GPA for them?
So we look at other things. We typically will receive some sort of transcript, and we get that information and evaluate. Generally looking at, they will give some sort of equivalent as to what it would be similar to a GPA from a United States undergrad school. So we do have those parameters that we use, but it might be other things that we are looking at as well in terms of Lsat, work experience. So again, as others have said, every piece of the application is just that's exactly what it is just one piece. So we use a lot of the other information in the application to make those determinations.
Thank you. What I'd like to do at this point is to give my colleagues the opportunity, if you have any closing remarks or would like to cover an area or topic that perhaps was not covered, we're going to try that. And if a couple of my colleagues are willing to stay online, I may attempt to take questions, but we'll see how we are on time. So we are going to start with Matthew. Any closing remarks, final thoughts?
Yeah, well, first, I just want to say that, as you can tell, all of the schools here are here because we are interested in you as a candidate, but also in your success. All of our schools offer many different things, have different environments, have different cultures, and prioritize different things. And this is an opportunity for you to really ask your questions and figure out if we are a good fit for you. The other thing is, when obviously times right now are a bit challenging when it comes to visiting the institutions, but, don't feel that you can't reach out to us, right? Many of us offer virtual opportunities to meet with us. And so please take advantage of that. So I would just say that, put your best foot forward, and we're here to help you. And we just look forward to your application whenever the time comes.
Thank you, Matthew. Michelle from TSU, any final thoughts?
Yes, we want you. There is not a law school in the country that is undertaken to hire a dean of rejection. I think a lot of students think that that's what our job is to get as many applicants as we possibly can, as many applications, and have the pleasure of rejecting them. That is not what we're trying to do. So all of us want to set you up for success and want to give you the advice that we think will be helpful to you to gain admission to the school of your choice and to follow the dream that you have. We want to partner with that, all of us.
Thank you. Dean Mensah, any closing thoughts?
So my closing thoughts, as you've heard from all of us, and you're obviously at the point where you're researching schools, is to really do some self-reflection on what's important to you and what you need to be successful. I think law school, you'll find, will be one of the most challenging times of your life. And so to set yourself up to succeed, what is it that you're looking for in a law school? What will make you the happiest? Where will you have the support you need? I think having a support system is really important. If you're the type of person who likes to be around familiarity, people family, things like that, then maybe staying closer to home makes more sense versus someone who maybe is ready for that adventure to go somewhere else and kind of start over. But being true, self-reflection, being true to yourself, what's going to make you successful, make sure whatever those core things are, you stick with that as you're researching schools and making a decision on where it's best for you to attend.
Thank you. Danielle, any final thoughts from you?
Yes, I know Dean Branson mentioned earlier the feelings of imposter syndrome. Please understand that honestly, everybody's kind of feeling like that, feeling a little bit overwhelmed. But just remember, whenever you get to your law school, you start orientation, wherever you're at, you are there because you deserve to be there. So don't let those imposter syndromes totally overwhelm you. If you do feel like you're struggling and you're not keeping up, all of our schools have amazing resources for students. So just reach out, but also know that you do deserve to be at whatever law school you end up in the fall.
Thank you. Jenny.
I only have one thing to add to what everybody else has said. Stay off the blogs. It's not good for your sanity, most of the information on there is wrong. So y'all are doing right by coming to panels like this and talking to us. So that would be my closing advice. Stay off those blogs.
Thanks, Jenny. Terrence.
I think I have COVID brain because I can't adjust quickly on the fly. Jenny, oh my God, hit it. That's exactly what I was going to say, because you have the most credible people in regards to the law school admissions process, in regards to our particular law schools, sitting in front of you right now. I, for the life of me, cannot understand it. Maybe it goes back to what I said earlier about oversharing, but I, for the life of me, can't wrap my mind around why you'd rather be on Reddit trying to figure out what's going on at Texas A&M rather than calling Assistant Dean Terrence Cook and asking him. We're not selling used cars here, people. We're talking about your lives, your future, your passions, your ambitions, and we take that very seriously. And so we all have your best interest at heart. And so don't be afraid, reach out, ask questions. Are there crazy questions? Probably, but we'll answer those too. And we'll let you know. That's kind of crazy. You may not want to ask anyone ever again. But seriously, I see all my colleagues dropping contact information in the chat room. We mean that. But also be very forgiving, because I saw there were upwards of 200 people, I think, on this, and we're doing these all over the world, nationwide, tons of people. Give me a little bit of time to respond to you. Definitely use email, because I know you don't want my call at 2 a.m., but I am up at 2 a.m. responding to emails. But definitely rely upon the most reliable sources in terms of seeking out your information and things of that nature, and understand that all of these, I'll call them third-party entities and chat boards and things of that nature, they have their place, they have their purpose, they have their function, but go to the source possible in terms of seeking that critical information.
Before I move on to my next colleague, I just want to make a comment. I agree. Stay off the blog, stay off IG, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. You will never, ever have the opportunity that you have today. You have the decision makers all over Texas for all the law schools right here, willing to share, be very honest with you, give up their time. We're all colleagues. We're not competitors. We all want you to make the best choice for you and to ensure that it is a good fit. And a student may find themselves fitting in very well at Baylor, but maybe not at the University of Houston Law Center. And our goal ultimately is to ensure a pathway for success for those people who are interested in going to law school. So I commend Jenny. Yes, yes, yes. Hashtag stay off the blogs. Love you. Professor Owsley, your closing remarks.
I just want to thank all the people who attended. This was, great for me. I want to echo what has been said is we have 10 great law schools here in the state of Texas. Each law school, it may not be for everyone, but everyone can find a law school that will serve their needs and their intellectual capabilities. I know that the faculties and the administrators at each law school want you all to succeed if you choose to enter the profession of law. And so, but you have the work to do too. You have to figure out where is best for you. So good luck in your search.
Thank you. St. Mary's, closing thoughts?
Yes, if you have to visit blogs, do Disney blogs or something fun like that. That's where I spend all my time, not law school blogs. But you do, I think that we didn't really talk about just making sure that the timing is right for you to go to law school. There is no necessarily rush to get to law school. So definitely make sure you take your time to go over the information, ask the right questions, talk to the right people before you make that decision, because it's so important.
Okay, South Texas.
Well, you get to the end of this and I'm not sure how to add much. All great advice from all of my colleagues. I guess, everyone, we're all so caught up in COVID and, the problems that it's caused and the setbacks that many of us have faced. And it's still a good time to go to law school. The poll, it just kind of solidified what I think a lot of people are feeling is that we're going. We have a mission. We've always wanted to go. We want to fulfill a dream. We got to make a difference. And I think now, even more than ever, is a great time to go to law school. So I commend all of you for being here today, for taking advantage of all these wise people and the advice that I hope you were able to take away. But yeah, COVID be darned. It's a great time to go to school. And, 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to be dealing with some of the things that happened during this time. And we're going to need good people to be here to serve. So welcome.
Awesome. Thanks, Alicia. And certainly last but not least, Jill, SMU.
Thank you. I unmuted myself early so that I could be ready. It's super hard to go last after all that great advice. So I'm just going to add one thing, which is something I'm very fond of saying, but I stole from another colleague years ago. It's that keep in mind, we are not, and it echoes in some ways what Dean Rahman says, we are not in the business of keeping you out. We are in the business of finding ways to let you in. Keep that in mind throughout your search. And thank you so much for being here.
And before we close out, I have 2 other things that I would like to do. I did see someone compiling a list of contact information, but I'm going to ask my colleagues if you don't mind dropping your contact information into the chat, or at least your website, whatever you're comfortable with sharing. And before we close out, I do have to ask my last question. So we'll launch our last poll. Wow, awesome. Well, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dean Mensah for giving me the opportunity. Now I can come off there. They're giving me the opportunity to facilitate this panel with my colleagues. These are a great group of folks to work with. They are very interested in helping you. So again, their information is in the chat box. Feel free to reach out. Take a look at the websites of all of the schools listed here before you reach out, maybe. I am certain that a number of your questions will probably be answered. All of us probably have FAQs. We have opportunities to visit our institutions virtually, sit in on classes, and hopefully when life gets back to, I'm not going to say normal, but when life gets back to better, we can all meet in person. Thank you so much for your time and have a great day.